This year, as Remember.org marks its 30th anniversary, I find myself reflecting on why this site was born. To preserve memory, person by person, story by story, with care and respect. On this Yom HaShoah, a day etched in our memory, we pause to remember the millions and honor those who survive and bore witness. Remember.org began as a single act of remembrance and grew into a shared archive of truth, not to speak for survivors, to listen, not interfere, and remember the stories are the reason we're here. Today I'm deeply honored to share the story of Kalman and Leopold surviving Mengele's Auschwitz, told by Richard K. Lowy, Leopold's son. In this conversation, Richard brings to life a father's survival and a family's strength, not as history, but as testimony that calls us to bear witness. Zachor, remember, listen.
So my father arrived in May 15th to 18th of May 1944 with his twin sister and his family, and his oldest sister and her baby, and his parents, my grandparents, went to the gas chambers, and the three other sisters went to the slave labor camp. And Mengele had taken my father and Miriam, his twin sister, off the ramp. Kalman arrived around the middle of June, and he arrived with his grandfather, his mother, and his twin sister, Judith. And once again, those two were taken off the ramp to become part of the experimentation. The grandfather was sent to the gas chamber, and the mother was actually kept. And so she was put into the women's barracks with her daughter, Judith. So one morning, I believe it was June 21st of 1944, an SS officer is walking down the line, and he picks two boys out of the line. One boy is Kalman, walks a little farther down, pulls out Leopold. The two boys then follow the SS officer outside the electrified gates and inside the SS guard shack of Mengele's hospital camp. And they become the servant boys of these SS guards for 6.5 months. And what's really interesting is that they witnessed the day-to-day operations, not just the vicious, brutal beatings and how mean the guards were, etc. They could see through the French windows. They could walk outside as they were emptying the water and doing the cleaning, running errands on bicycles. So they got to see what was going on in the camp from more of a guard's perspective. They were literally standing behind guards as the guards were outside, doing these selections, and they would be over between the electrified fence and the guard shack watching everything go on. All the other Jews and prisoners were inside either the barracks being locked down, so they couldn't see any of this going on, and they never got to witness this. So that's what makes it really interesting. And if you look at the age of these boys, you're going to see Kalman. He's a very young, he's 14 years old. He's what you call a yeshiva bocher. He's very religious, and he doesn't know what a Nazi is. He doesn't know about the war. He doesn't know what's happening and going on. He literally was on his way home for Passover, and on March 19th, he arrived in Budapest, and this was the day that the Hungarians were occupied by Germany, and he was taken away. He was put into a detention center at a military hall, and then he was released because he was under the age of 16. He was only 14, so they weren't collecting the 14-year-olds later. They would get them later. They wanted the slave labor, and they were taking all of the older people and moving them either to Auschwitz or to slave labor camps. So when he arrived in Auschwitz, he had no idea of what was going on. He just totally clueless, totally naive. They didn't read newspapers. They didn't listen to radios. They studied the Jewish history and the Torah, the Talmud, and so they were religious. My father, on the other hand, was 16 years old, and he was a lot more intuitive to what was going on, very streetwise. He had a job at the barrel factory earlier on. He was watching how the Hungarians, the Iron Cross, were dealing with the Jews at the time, the rising of the anti-Semitism. He was on the streets as these things were happening. So he really got an understanding of what was going on leading up to being deported and being put into the brick factory and then being taken to Auschwitz. So he'd also been in Auschwitz about a month to a month and a half earlier than Kalman. So he had a feel for the lay of the land.
Leopold had the lay of the land in Auschwitz. Whew. And Kalman, like most of us, not even knowing what he was getting into or even understanding it. Let's let Richard Dulu, reading from the book Kalman and Leopold, Surviving Mengele's Auschwitz, and listen to the heart of this story.
So this is the book, right? And I would just like to read to you just this opening introduction, right? Which you can find if you go on Amazon or one of these places, you can actually find this. And so I'm just going to read this to you. This is Kalman, and this is his introduction. This is part of the strange generation of ours. I call it the mad generation of the Great Fire, which at the time was most of Europe. Things happen out of the blue, not just with us. Other people have discovered a lost family member by pure chance. Somebody notices and says, I know this lady. Her last name is such and such. In my case, I've been looking for Lipa for 56 years. All I have in my head is the name Lipa. We never formally introduced ourselves. I am Kalman. He was Lipa. We spent 6.5 months working together in the SS guard shack of Joseph Mengele's hospital camp in Auschwitz-Birkenau. He saved me from beatings and looked out for me, but I knew very little about him. In January of 1945, the Russian army overtook Birkenau, and we were free to go. Lipa and I parted without much ado. It's like that in Birkenau. We just said goodbye without understanding it could be the last time we saw each other. This is how I parted from my grandfather on the train ramp. It was part of life. Lipa went that way and I went this way. Where is Lipa today? Nobody knows. Lipa was a nickname. He's someone else. Wednesday, October 31st, 2001. The 56-year search is over. The phone rings in the kitchen. My wife answers it and calls out to me in the living room. It's your sister. There's a program on Channel 8 about the Mengele twins. It's 6:30 p.m. Tel Aviv time, and there's a program on the National Geographic Channel called Leo's Journey, the story of the Mengele twins. It's detailed through the eyes of a Leo Lowy. What Mengele twin wouldn't want to stop and watch this? I'm watching the show, and another Yankel is making the rounds of Auschwitz with his family. This guy Leo is showing his family around, like I did with my two twin boys. I'm impressed. At 21 minutes and 17 seconds into the film, there's a picture of Leo and his twin sister, Miriam, as youths. I can't believe my eyes. I shout at the television, it's Lipa. The ball in my mind starts rolling at 21 minutes and 17 and a half seconds. How could I know the guy with glasses showing his family around was my Lipa? There's no doubt I know this face. Hold it, everybody. That's him. It's Lipa. I worked 10 hours a day with him through the last weeks of June 1944, all of July, August, September, October, November, and into December. Just after Christmas, the SS guards stopped our work and told us to get out. Our job was finished. That's when Lipa and I parted. Shortly after, the evacuation began. My wife calls out from the kitchen, What are you talking about? I call back, Come in here now. What are you screaming about? She asks. A little annoyed, I respond, Come here, quickly. The screen no longer shows the image of Lipa. I curse quietly in Hungarian as the film goes on. My wife comes in and says, What's the problem? I tell her, Sit here and wait. At 44 minutes and 26 seconds, as the film is ending, they're kind enough to show the same picture of Leo as a young boy. I point at the screen and say, There, that's Lipa. To me, the producers are making it clear the time has come for these two mice to meet again. That's how it starts.
Wow.
So it's not this history book. It's
Yeah,
not like, these are the facts and these are the details and this is the horror. This is them talking to us, telling us how it happened in their words.
Wow. It's like, I don't even know to use the word coincidences. It's just stunning to see, not just seeing, but they wouldn't have even met if they weren't twins.
They They wouldn't have met if they weren't twins. They would have gone right to the gas chambers because dad was very slight. He was not a big man or a big boy. So he would have gone right to the gas chambers. Kalman, same thing. Kalman was only 14 years old. They had no use. They wouldn't use him in the slave labor. He would have gone to the gas chambers. The only reason they survived was because of Mengele. Dad calls Mengele the angel of life because he was the reason they stayed alive. And it wasn't because he wanted to keep them alive. They would have never survived after the war. The only reason that they survived was because they were twins and because Mengele needed them for his experiments. If one of the twins died, then the other one would be killed. So there were so many moments where this could have ended up badly for Kalman and Judith or for Leopold and Miriam. And Mengele didn't have time to finish his job. And that's the only reason they survived. If the Russians hadn't liberated the camp in 1945, January, then I wouldn't be sitting here.
People really forgot that this 400,000 deported Hungarian Jews out of the blue, because they were an independent country until they were occupied in 44 and they supported Hitler and the Nazis. But when that happened, that was it for them. This is literally 1 out of 4. And to your point, only if they could work, really work, or there was something like this. And just to know just the context of how basically on the razor's edge Kalman and Leopold walked from the minute they left Hungary.
On one day, Coleman was finishing work detail. And I have to tell a little backstory.
Yeah.
So when Coleman arrived to Auschwitz, and he was shaven and given his dirty clothes and marked with the tattoo on his arm, and then he was taken to a barrack. And when they said, "This is where you will stay," he opened the barrack door, and he's about to walk in, and he's looking around, and he's seeing all of these emaciated people who are just walking skeletons, and the smell was just so horrific, and he didn't know what was going on. And then this little boy starts walking towards him, and he realizes it's not a little boy. He's all wrinkled. It's a dwarf. And the dwarf comes up to him and he says, "What's your name?" And he says, "My name is Kalman Braun. They brought me here. They told me this is where I'm supposed to stay. I don't know what's going on." And the dwarf says to him, "You be with me. I will take care of you." He takes his hand and he says, "Come with me." And he takes him inside the barrack and he starts telling him the day-to-day operations of what's going to happen, and they're going to get you up at 5 o'clock. And Kalman interrupts him and he says, "What's your name?" And he says, "My name is Ludovic Feld, but you can call me Lioche." And the dwarf starts going on that 5 o'clock there's going to be a roll call and we must be out. And Kalman stops him and says, "Feld." He says, "I had an uncle named Feld, Yitzhak Feld. He married my crazy aunt, my Meshuggah aunt." And the dwarf looks at him and he ponders for a moment. He says, "Oh," he says, "that's my younger brother." The dwarf is Coleman's uncle.
Wow.
And so now the two stay together and they're in this barrack together of misery. And the dwarf is quite prolific. And not only that, he is also an artist and he is one of Mengele's artists. Mengele actually uses him to draw his portrait and scenes around the camp. And so the dwarf has a certain notoriety within the camp. And so, in fact, he is from Slovakia. And today in Slovakia, there is a bronze statue of him, and they have a museum of his art that exists today. If you look it up on the internet, Ludovic Feld, you'll find more information about him. And so he's now staying or on the bunk with Ludovic Feld. And one day, Kalman comes back from the work detail at the guard shack. He comes in and he's sitting with Ludovic Feld on the bottom bunk, and they're breaking little pieces of bread, having their little meal at the end of the day. And Ludovic says to Kalman, he says, "You know what day it is today?" Kalman has no idea. Ludovic has been marking it on the side of the barrack with his thumbnail, just marking away, the days. He says, "It's September 17th. It's Rosh Hashanah. It's New Year's. Good Yontov. Happy New Year." And Kalman is going, "Happy New Year?" It's like, and so this what's going on. And
Yeah.
so the next morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, Coleman gets up, meets my father outside the barrack, and they're walking as they're going to work at the guard shack. And Coleman says to my father, he says, "You know what day it is today?" My father shrugs. He says, "No." He says, "It's September 18th. It's Rosh Hashanah." And my father looks at him and he says, "No." He says, "Maybe Fritzy Fritz will give us the day off. You ask him." Fritzy Fritz is the guard that beat the shit out of these kids for leaving a
Wow.
speck of dust on the coal stove. Big Bavarian
Yeah.
soldier, mean looking guy, and he would beat the crap out of them, kick them. It was brutal. And so
Yeah.
my dad tells him, "You ask." So there was humor going on, and the Jewish people have a sense of humor.
A sense of humor when looking at history and memory and the experience that they had to go through that is beyond words, but in Kalman and Leopold, it comes so down to earth, which is what I really enjoy about everything I've learned here. And the best part that Richard has as an author is not just having a book, but he actually has a special way of teaching this to bring his father in the room through his son.
What I do as well is I try to get out and talk to different communities. And when I do that, I don't go out and talk about my story or what I've done or what I do is I do like a one man show where I will go and present the story as if it's my father's story in the sense that in his words. I have a program called Leo's Journey in My Father's Words where I basically become my father and I recite his testimony as if I am my father. And if you look on the author page, it will give you some background on myself and what I've done, but it also will show you a number of just different programs of going out and telling the story. And this one I'm quite proud of. This one was at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, and it was telling the story in my father's words, and it really resonates with people. You get the feeling. This one was in a congregation. Again, I use the visual in behind, so as it happens, and people are riveted. It's there. People come up to me afterwards, and they feel like I'm Leo, and I go, "No, no, no, no. I'm just in saying his story and go to schools." And so a number of different types of programs to get this out. And I'm very honored under the reviews. You'll see the different reviews. Jerusalem Post wrote a huge article, one-page article on the story. We're getting great reviews from different reviewers. So I encourage people that if you do read it, if you go out and please, hopefully you do, um, please leave a review. The reviews are so important just to hear what you're saying. And I am also going to be appearing at a number of different programs. I'm off to the London Book Fair in London. On March 23rd, I'm doing an international global book launch with the South African Holocaust and Genocide Centers in Cape Town, Johannesburg, and in Durban. We've got Classrooms Without Borders, which are going to be joining us. We've got organizations out of London and second generation groups that are joining. So we're really hoping to build a large following for this. And then during that program, I will do a number of readings and have some visuals behind me. In Leipzig Book Fair, uh, I'll be at in March 27th to the 30th. I'm meeting with the grandson of von Verscher, Mengele's mentor. And so I will be at the book fair with the grandson of von Ottmar von Verscher, which is going to be quite something. And then in Los Angeles, I'm doing the Los Angeles Times Festival of Books. So there's a lot going on, a lot that's already happened. There's videos on the site that you can go to. And I also have a learn and an explore educational resources that we have on the site as well, and all the different media coverage that we've been getting. And what's really interesting, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that the British Columbia Ministry of Education and Childcare also supports this. And the reason they support it is because it's a story that could be told in schools. It's not just a story that is, oh, it's too horrific. We can't really teach it. This is a story that's resonating with kids that are in grade 10, grade 11, and they're enjoying, not the right word, but they're engaged in reading the story. There's lots of opportunity to get this into the schools, get this into the educational programs, and create discussions on it.